Thanks for staying with us. We have a special guest with us again in the studio, U.S. Representative Patrick Murphy from Florida's 18th District, our congressman covers the Port St. Lucie and Treasure Coast area. Great to have you back, Congressman.
Thanks, Ed. Great to be back on the show.
We know you're keeping busy. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
It's not an easy job being in Congress. There's so many issues you have to keep up on and talk about and learn about and work with and meet people. And you've been doing that, so we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today about those that are affecting us, particularly in this area. And there's a lot of stuff, so we can kind of just dig right in.
Sounds good.
Let's start off with, as you go back and forth between Washington and Florida, and the economy seems to be improving. We know we're having some improvements locally. How does it look from your perspective?
You hit the nail on the head. There are pockets of growth and there are pockets of recovery, but this has been a very lackluster recovery. And that's unfortunate for really our country and a lot of folks. I get very frustrated, seeing how D.C. could and I think should be doing a much better job of creating that environment that is conducive to job growth. Unfortunately, what Congress did last year by shutting down the government, by having a fiscal cliff, a sequester, that is not creating stability or certainty that businesses need to start investing, to start getting those wheels back in motion, applying for loans, expanding their businesses. There's a lot of capital right now on the sidelines. Those folks need that certainty to start reinvesting. And we've had an opportunity, and I've had an opportunity in my 20-some months, that I was been elected, to tour over 50 local businesses, and combining that with my experience as a CPA and small business owner, put together a jobs plan, put together a whole host of ideas to get our economy going again, starting with tax reform, reducing regulations, making sure to invest in education, invest in research development, whether that's Scripps and Max Planck and VGTI and those local institutions we have, or at USDA facility with some of the ag research that needs to be done to prevent the greening that's going on for our farmers. There's a lot of different areas to cover, and we've had a great opportunity to visit almost, all the different sects of businesses in our community.
Right, and those tours to businesses out there, they're glad to have you come out and hear from them, from their actual on-the-ground, talk about boots on the ground, their on-the-ground perspective of what's really happening. How does it play out in that particular business? And
I was just going to say, that I always tell people it's my title is representative, right? It's my job to be the voice of this community and to take ideas. We've taken several different ideas that I've heard touring businesses and put that into legislation that we've introduced in the United States Congress, to help either reduce regulations or expand a market for somebody. So I love doing that because that's, I think, democracy at work.
What you say about there's pockets and kind of spotty, you're right, we see that at City Hall also. While good things are happening for some, an expanded economy is not happening everywhere. It's not happening in every industry. Right now there's more construction going on. That's good news in this town. But other industries are still not happening as fast. Retail's not growing as much. We're getting some stores here, but not at the level that we'd like to see.
No, you're exactly right. And so much of our local economy is based on real estate, whether that's construction, whether that's the realtors, whether that's the engineers, the architects, et cetera. It's all tied to real estate, and it's been a very slow recovery. A lot of that, I believe, unfortunately, has to do with some of the burdensome regulations that were put into place. Something called, Dodd-Frank really put a kind of a chokehold on a lot of the community banks and the local banks that are the ones that often give that first loan out to a first-time home buyer, to a middle-class, lower-income family, trying to build a little bit of equity and live that American dream with that first house. And unfortunately, the regulations, I believe, have swung a little too far in one direction. We've got to get that back. So fighting to do that every day in Congress.
Very good. Let's just switch over to something else. There's so many environmental related issues out there, and one of them is offshore drilling offshore of Florida. Now that's the Gulf of Mexico, not the Atlantic side where that's a question. But you were against a House bill calling for that. Talk to us about that a little bit.
One of the great things we have going in our country right now is energy. We've actually seen 600,000 manufacturing jobs come back to the United States of America over the past couple of years. A lot of those jobs are directly attributed to a stable energy sector, stable, predictable energy costs. So we're going to continue to see that as long as we are on the mindset of becoming energy independent. We are energy independent with natural gas, on the way to being energy independent with oil. I do not support offshore oil drilling off the east coast of Florida. So much of our local economy is built on tourism, is built on the beaches, boating, fishing, etc. I believe that would hinder it to be off the east coast.
On the east coast?
On the east coast, on the Atlantic side. On the Gulf side, you know, I actually had a small environmental cleanup company after the BP oil spill. So I saw firsthand the damage that can be done after an oil spill. And we do not want that on the east coast. What I've proposed is that if you are one of these big energy companies and you want to go drill in the Gulf, that you have to remove some of the existing antiquated old rigs that exist. There are thousands and thousands of rigs sitting out there abandoned, basically. Some are leaking, some are rusted. Boats are, you know, crashing into them, unfortunately. There's something not talked about a lot. So let's use the new technology with the safest equipment. And if you want to go, you meet the standards, you know, of current times, put the new, you know, rig in the Gulf, but remove some of the older rigs that are currently existing.
Right, you can't leave that. Essentially, those will crumble eventually down. They'll crumble and just be a big mess out there. So I guess that needs to be addressed first. Is that what you're saying? Not opposing all drilling, just address those
Let's
issues.
put it in a place where another, you know, component of offshore oil drilling is the infrastructure that goes along with it. When I was living in New Orleans, you know, every day you'd see helicopters nonstop. There were refineries. There was all sorts of equipment and dirty equipment that goes along with that. I don't see that fitting in here in Port St. Lucie or in Stewart, in Palm Beach Gardens. You know, it's a much different environment. So keep it where it's at. We can invest in the drilling there. There's still plenty of oil there. But let's also set our sights on the future, you know, on greener energies, on solar, on wind, on thermal, on tidal, all the other opportunities that are out there. So I'm an all of the above energy person where, yes, we need some oil, but we also should be looking to the future. And that's not going to happen overnight, but let's make sure the wheels are in motion.
And even though this isn't on the East Coast, as you've pointed out in the past, when that BP spill happened, there was a threat of it making its way around and making its way up to the East Coast. So it still matters to our beaches directly here in our waterways. So that's also important. All right, so let's talk about another big one's been in the news a lot, All Aboard Florida. What's going on with All Aboard Florida?
So, you know, there's a proposal for high-speed rail from Orlando to Miami. This proposal is going along the FEC tracks. Those are the easternmost tracks in our communities. I believe that this would pose serious problems for the safety, for the livability, for the quality of life, in the maritime industry. You know, start off with maritime. Their estimates are that the bridges are going to be closed at least twice as long as they currently are now. So if you're a boater, you're going to have minutes, you know, to get out the inlet, whether that's the St. Lucie or whether that's the Loxahatchee. And two of the most problematic bridges in the whole system are in this congressional district. So we have some concerns there, not just for the commercial fishermen, but the recreational, you know, boaters as well. It's a big part of our community. Safety, another one. I was recently at a hospital talking to an ambulance driver. You know, he pointed out, in order to get to that particular hospital, there's one way in, one way out. It's right there next to the tracks. If, God forbid, one of our relatives, one of us, are in that ambulance, we don't want to be waiting 15 minutes for that freight train. So the proposal
that almost seems a no-brainer.
Right.
That seems so easy and clear.
Exactly. And you know, our community, I don't think, is designed for 32 passenger trains. Right now, there's 14 freight. An additional 14 will be in the near future. So you're talking over 50 trains a day, you know, coming through the middle of all of our neighborhoods. That is going to pose a real problem. But I'm also concerned with the fiscal aspect of this. You know, there's some folks out there that support this, you know, as it is. The fiscal part is very concerning. And I believe that using taxpayer money, asking for a $1.8 billion RIF loan, you know, that's our taxpayer money, to then be able to pay back a junk bond, to be able to expand into real estate, to expand their freight operation, isn't prudent use of our money. So I've got some real concerns about that, and I've been raising those red flags, working with the administration, working with the Secretary of Transportation, had the Coast Guard come up here, worked with Congressman Bill Posey just north of us. We asked the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, to do an independent study to see the financial feasibility of this project. So we're going to continue raising, you know, red flags about this and pointing out our concerns.
You were talking about two of the bridges being here. You took the Coast Guard out on a tour to see the bridge. What's the problem with the bridge?
Well, First of all, these bridges were built in the 1930s. You know, they're very old. The mechanism to lift them is also very old, and it takes a lot of time. So it's not just the sheer amount of time that it takes for the train to cross. It's the 2 to 4 minutes it takes to open and then again to close it. It all starts to add up. So if you live west of the train tracks, for example, and you're trying to get out, estimates are the bridges might be down between 30 to 45 minutes at the busiest hours. So you say you're a fisherman, you're trying to go out Saturday morning, go fishing. Well, you've got this small window to get out. Now imagine you got 5 minutes to do it. You might have 100 boats lined up. You get some wind, some current, tides, etc. All move. You're asking for a problem. And then you add in the safety concerns, where most of the communities and local, law enforcement has one boat. Recently the emergency responders came out against this because they know they don't have the resources. They have one boat. If it's on the, say, the east side of the tracks and something happens on the west and there's a 15-minute, train coming through, there's nothing they can do except swim from the shore out to try to help somebody, and that's not realistic. So we've got some real concerns.
Yeah, that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. So,
and let me just note that the Coast Guard is going to be coming to our communities, listening to all the very specific concerns we have. So I urge everybody to look on our website, to look on the Coast Guard's website, get that information. We will, of course, be announcing it as well when it's all made official, but give very specific concerns for what they see, happening. Now, if you're for it, let that be known. If you're against it, let that be known. But make sure it's a very particular critique of the project so the Coast Guard can make a good decision.
Very good. We'll have to stay in touch to find out what happens with that one, because that is a big issue.
Yes, sir.
And it's an important one. Now let's talk about the Indian River Lagoon, also very important all over the Treasure Coast. A big deal to keep it clean, to make it better, and you've been working on that on a number of fronts. Let's talk about that for a moment. Yeah,
preventing the discharges out of Lake Okeechobee and protecting the Everglades has been one of my top priorities in my office since the day I got elected. And it's not just a moral issue and a quality of life for all of us, but tying back to your first question about the economy. For every dollar spent on our local water infrastructure, it comes back 3 to 1 to our economy. And you think about the hotels, you think about the restaurants, the charter boat fishermen, and the property values, all tied to clean air, clean water, etc. So we cannot have another lost summer where you had toxic water, in our estuary. So I was able to work with the administration, got $38 million. That's 100% of the amount of money the Army Corps requested to build C-44, to get that, continue that project. That is a large water retention facility, hold the water, treat it, so when it does come out to our area, it's cleaner water. Also was able to be very involved in the passage of the water bill. It hasn't passed in 7 years. This year's water bill included about 4 projects totaling almost $1 billion that was authorized to help clean that water, to help send it south. It's a long-term, plan and goal, but the wheels are in motion. We have to continue advocating for that.
That idea of sending the water south is so important, because that was the original way the Everglades were,
Exactly.
And the water flowed south, and that's why it didn't back up and come over here into the Indian River Lagoon.
Exactly.
But now it gets channeled because of decisions made decades and decades ago.
Yes.
It gets channeled this way. So also things going on in Miami. You're supporting the elevation of Tamiami Trail down there.
Yes.
How does that affect it?
Yeah, so right now, not only do you have the Herbert Hoover, dike built in the south part of the lake, which was built basically out of muck, 80 plus years ago, which acts as a dam, but you also have the Tamiami Trail, which acts as a dam as well. So not only do we have to improve the actual dike around it, we have to lift that Tamiami Trail. So as we start to send water south, there's been land acquisitions, etc., to try to move that water south. It needs a place to go. So the federal government and the state government have a deal where every dollar is matched by the other for Everglades improvement projects. This is no different. So we've been working with the Department of Interior and other agencies to make sure that this bridge project moves forward. And one of my commitments has been making sure that, number one, this isn't a partisan issue, but also working with local, state, and federal officials getting them all in the same room, trying to play quarterback to get everybody on the same page for what can be done immediately.
And you've got some bipartisan agreement with some of the congressional members to the south of us on some of these ideas.
Yes, we have, and most of the delegation works pretty well together on issues related to the Everglades.
Very important, because it's just, as you mentioned, it's for the health, it's for the beauty, it's for the economy. The river and the environment and the lagoon is so important to this area. It's just critical. Let's go on to some other issues. Fueling America's Future Act is something you've been supporting. What is the Fueling America's Future Act? Yeah,
so this again kind of goes back to our energy conversation, where nothing against the current cars that are out there, the fossil fuel powered, but incentivizing businesses to start investing in the way of the future. Right here in St. Lucie County, we are proud to be home to a Tesla charging station in a shopping center, not too far from here. I'm sure a lot of folks have seen that. And what this bill would do, and I worked with a Republican colleague, Mr. Dent, on putting this forward, would incentivize any shopping center owner, anybody with some real estate, to put a renewable fuel, whether it's a charging station, whether it's hydrogen, whatever it may be, on their property. Maybe it's a gas station. Start incentivizing them by allowing them to write off a lot of that expense and putting that on their property. One of the challenges with Teslas or alternative fuel vehicles is, where do you recharge it, refuel it, etc. This would help a lot of those gas station, the property owners, do just that.
One of the intriguing things about that Tesla station is it's part of a network across the country.
Yes.
You can travel up and down the East Coast, or now out to the West Coast, from Tesla station to Tesla station, refueling and never using or even paying for a dime of fuel. That way you recharge. How clean and effective that is, and so the time is here for steps to be taken to bring that in, and it's important to Lucie. It's good to have that here in our community.
It sure is, and I mean the writing's on the wall. We've all heard about Ford and GM and Chrysler. All the companies, BMW, have all bought Teslas, and they're tearing them apart, trying to figure out that technology so they can replicate it in their own cars. So we know this is the beginning of a big trend. We want to make sure those charging, fueling stations, are there for these, all these new cars.
Excellent. One of the other things you've been doing, you've been concerned about a rise in anti-Semitism that's been showing up in places around the globe, and that's caught your attention. You're working to try to keep that as a on the front burner, so to speak, for the State Department.
Anti-Semitism is something that I believe America must take the lead in, ensuring that it doesn't start popping up in this country, but also making sure in other countries where we've seen it, whether it's been boycotts, whether it's been protests, whether it's even shootings, we have to take the lead. As a democracy, and the largest, most powerful democracy in the world, we have a responsibility, I believe. And it's not just about, the Jews. It's about making sure Christians or Muslims or any other ethnicity or sect or minority in any community doesn't have these sorts of things done against them. So we have to set that bar of respect for everybody, and no exclusions there. So I was able to give a speech on the House floor recently talking about anti-Semitism. I've been working, again, bipartisan with my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, writing a letter in our country. But now the next step is working with the United Nations, and I'm going to be leading that charge with my colleagues, writing a letter, making sure that we are working with all the other parliaments, all the other similar institutions to ours, to crack down on this anti-Semitism.
This congressional district has people from every walk of life, every background, every nationality. So for you to keep that up high on people's minds is important, because we really all do share this area together.
Yes.
And we need to be respectful of that. Last year, the Simon Wiesenthal Center brought their traveling Holocaust memorial exhibit through Port St. Lucie, stopped at the Civic Center. It was quite powerful. It was quite powerful. It drew a lot of people out there. It was a good event. So you've been busy with a lot of stuff, so we're going to let you go here. But if people want to keep in touch with you and find out what you're doing, what are some of the ways that they can do that? Yeah,
well, please visit my website at patrickmurphy.house.gov. On that website, they can sign up for our newsletter. We have a weekly newsletter and we have a monthly newsletter. completely based on what has actually happened, what is going to happen, events we're going to be at, and I always have a poll on there to get the pulse of the community. So a great way to stay in touch with us. They can go to Facebook. They can find us there, Congressman Patrick Murphy, or on Twitter, which is Rep Murphy FL is our handle. So love hearing from all the constituents, whether it's a concern, whether it's something we can help with. That's my job. We've been able to, and I've been able to do over 500 events in our district. In the couple days a week that I'm home, getting out to see everybody. And I want to keep hearing from you and anybody that wants us to come by and see their business or their nonprofit or school, whatever it may be.
Well, the electronic media has been great this way to put a congressman so closely in touch with the people, where they can really hear and check on you often and see what you're doing, so that you're not so distant, as it might have been in the past. And now these tools are making that more possible.
Sure
than ever.
does.
And we certainly appreciate you coming into TV 20 to talk to the people of Port St. Lucie.
Good to be back on.
Directly,
Thank you.
to let them know what you're working on and kind of give them the view from your perspective. Keep them filled in on what you're doing in Washington. That's important for people to know. So we appreciate your time very much.
Thank you.
Representative Patrick Murphy, great
Thanks,
to have
Ed.
you here.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you.
We'll be back after this quick message, so stay with us.